Hi, this is Anita from the Dusty Roads podcast. I've always had a fondness and been a fan of really good sourdough bread. I like the bit of the tangy flavor of the bread and the chewy texture. And, it's really become a staple in my kitchen. It wasn't until recently that I started to delve into it and began to say, I really want to understand a little bit more of the history of this bread. Where did this bread come from? And I was quite surprised to learn that sourdough bread is actually quite an ancient bread. It began about 10,000 years ago when humans first began to cultivating grains in the Fertile Crescent. This region, often called the cradle of civilization, saw the dawn of agriculture. Really became a staple there during this part. Sourdough bread can be traced way back to ancient Egypt. I find this so fascinating that, ancient Egypt and the ancient Egyptians were eating a form of sourdough bread. They think that it probably happened accidentally when the dough was left out and wild yeast from the environment caused it to ferment. And then the discovery began to, transform bread making, giving rise to bread that was more nutritious and longer lasting. So one of the great things about sourdough bread is it's got the fermentation, which means that anyone who's into health knows that sourdough bread is a healthier bread to be able to eat than the regular breads. I'm talking about real sourdough bread here, and that it's also more nutritious because of the fermentation. Recent scientific advancements have allowed us to delve deeper into the ancient tradition. In 2019, researchers revived a 4,500-year-old yeast microbe from Egyptian artifacts. So, that's a very, very old yeast microbe, 4,500 years. So that means that, way back there in ancient Egypt, the bakers or the bakery there was using that sort of form of sourdough bread, and that they were eating this type of sourdough bread. It spread to ancient Greece. It spread to Rome. Around 800 BC, the Greeks adopted these methods, and soon after the Romans followed suit. The Romans were renowned for their engineering prowess, developed further the bread-making process and oven-building technologies, which helped popularize sourdough bread throughout their vast region. So, went from Egypt to Rome to Greece, and then people began to perfect on it until they made the perfect sourdough bread. Roman bakers became so adept at maintaining and using sourdough starters, which involved preserving a portion of the dough from each batch for the next batch. So they really understood the process of the fermentation, these bakers did, and they understood the process of being able to keep your sourdough starter for the next batch of bread. Sourdough bread came to America, which sort of had this very interesting journey. Anyone who knows sourdough bread knows the one place to get sourdough bread is in San Francisco. San Francisco has long been a place that is famous for sourdough bread, and here is the reason why. It came in the economic boom of the California gold rush in 1849. So during this period, an influx of people worldwide came to seek their fortunes, and they began to bring with them diverse cultural practices and a lot of their culinary traditions. The gold rush was a time of significant cultural exchange, and it was during this period that sourdough bread began to gain its foothold in America, particularly in San Francisco. French bread bakers, among them the Bourdain family, brought their sourdough starters from France to California. So in 1849, they established the Bourdain Bakery, which quickly gained popularity for its distinctive sourdough bread. And then, San Francisco, with its unique climate, its foggy mornings and warm afternoons, provide the perfect, environment for sourdough yeast fermentation. The wild yeast and the bacteria native to the area contributed to the bread's sort of, tangy flavor, making San Francisco sourdough bread a culinary icon. So if you go to San Francisco, the last time that I was there in San Francisco, I remember us going to downtown San Francisco and looking for some sourdough bread. If you are, traveling to San Francisco, definitely, trying out the San Francisco sourdough bread should be one of the things on your list, because it is really sort of the iconic thing to do in San Francisco, especially if you're a fan of sourdough bread. Today San Francisco, remains synonymous with sourdough bread. The city's bakers have preserved and refined their techniques over the years, maintaining a tradition that dates back to the gold rush. Imagine since 1849. The Bourdain Bakery is still in operation today, even though, it's changed hands and the same family doesn't own it anymore. But the bakery itself is still in operation. You can still find the bakery in San Francisco today. So if you're there and you want to go where the bread originally started, go to their bakery and get some of their sourdough bread. They have the original starter, which they brought from France, which is still being used today in the bakery. San Francisco and sourdough bread has become so renowned. Bakers and enthusiasts alike go there just to be able to find the San Francisco sourdough bread. There is some science behind the sourdough bread itself. So, it's not just a matter of the yeast, but, understanding some of the science of the sourdough bread might give you a new layer of appreciation for the bread itself. One of them is the wild yeast. And, yeasts that are actually naturally present in the environment. This is even better if you can, a place like San Francisco where yeast can be present in the environment. That the wild yeast produces slower, more gradual rise, which can enhance the bread's flavor and texture. Lactic acid bacteria also works alongside the wild yeast with the sourdough fermentation. And these bacteria convert the sugars into lactic and other types of acids, create this distinct sort of sour flavor. And, that's also where you could tell a good sourdough bread, because you'll see there'll be little bubbles in the bread, like there'll be like little holes in the bread. That means that it's a really true and good sourdough bread. Sourdough bread has become a part in America, at least in many other parts of the world. It's become a part of the American kitchen. And I know, I have a sister who bakes a lot of sourdough bread, and I have others I know who bake sourdough bread and keep their little yeast in they protect their little yeast all the time while they're baking their sourdough bread. And that's because sourdough bread has been known to have health benefits. It's known to be healthier than other types of bread. I feel very lucky here, because here where I live in Hanoi, Vietnam, there's some great bakeries that make some great sourdough breads. And I will just mention two of them. One is, of course, the Anderson Bakery. If you are here in Vietnam and you're looking for some great sourdough bread, go to the Anderson Bakery out in Tay Ho area on Dong Tien Mai. They make, every day fresh sourdough bread. I buy all my sourdough bread from them. Just really very, very good bread. And then there's another bakery called La Bonte, which is on the other side of the lake. And they actually do some interesting things with sourdough. They'll make sourdough cinnamon rolls, sourdough brownies. They use sourdough for a lot of different unique and interesting ways. So I love that, because it shows that, sourdough doesn't just have to be bread. You can use sourdough in many other types of recipes and other ways. If you're interested in finding out more about sourdough, we've written a blog entitled The Ancient History and Modern Revival of Sourdough Bread, and you'll be able to read more about the bread and be able to learn more about sourdough bread itself. This is Anita from the Dusty Roads podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you'll join with us, be part of our community. Give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to us. Subscribe to our channel. Subscribe to us and join with us and be part of our community. We're all about living our life as a global citizen, so come with us as we go on this journey to live our life, all to live our lives as a global citizen. Thank you so much.